Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. You can find more about IPA World by visiting ipaworld.org and more about IPA-USA by visiting IPA-USA.org. As a part of our efforts to promote play, we introduce Porch Play Chats, and they're conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all of the Porch Play Chats, and we're getting close to 100, so just know there's going to be lots of resources that are free to you on the IPA-USA.org website. If in the top right-hand corner you click on the YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube channel, every Monday, just like magic, a new IPA-USA Porch Play Chat will pop up into your feed. You can also friend us on our Facebook page, which is also in that top right-hand corner of the IPA-USA website. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA-USA. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy. Good
morning.
And joining us from Canada is Pierre Harrison. Pierre, we're so happy to see you again. Pierre is on the council for IPA World. And Pierre's an Ontario certified teacher and learning through play and inquiry specialist and a children's right to play advocate. And since 1985, Pierre has been involved in non-formal learning, having worked at various education centers in North America and Europe. In 2003, he launched PLAYLearnThink, a social enterprise focused on promoting child-directed play as a fundamental necessity for a healthy and fulfilling life. And he also facilitates Adventure PlayDays in schools and community settings across Canada. He is an internationally and nationally renowned keynoter. He facilitates training workshops for adults across the country and in Europe. He's appeared in print, radio, TV, and web media in Canada, and has offered a chapter in a book about play for parents. He's been involved in IPA Canada since 2005 and served as president from 2009 to 2019, bless your heart. And he lives in an off-grid stray bale house in the beautiful forest. I know, really.
Stray bale. What else is, we got a bunch of bales. They're just strays.
I just love it.
I hate those stray bales.
With Susanne and their 12-year-old son, Tom. So Pierre, welcome back. We're so glad to have you. And today the focus is play training.
So, exactly.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Tell me what that means.
Well, thanks for having me, Deb and Lisa. And so last time we talked, so really it's all about play advocacy. Last time we spoke about Adventure PlayDays in community and school spaces, and we started touching upon parent engagement Adventure PlayDays, where I do a little bit of training for the parents. So my second focus, I guess, for play advocacy is providing training to adults. You'll both probably remember that IPA World had done a global consultation to find out what really were the obstacles to play. And I think number one, maybe number two, definitely top three on the list was the adults' lack of understanding of what play is and its important role in children development. And so that's why an easy way to get people to do some training is to have fun with kids, and then parents start asking, people start asking questions. But then I started focusing on providing training for adults, mostly in the education world, but it has grown to the health, public health realm, to recreation, to municipalities. And so what I do is wherever I'm invited to provide a workshop, I offer a variety of workshops. And for me, the focus is really to provide information, to share my pedagogical documentation or personal stories, and then also to get the adults to play. So what I can do is I'll share some photos of some of the play days that I host, and you can see people playing with a bunch of stuff. So what I do is I bring in a whole bunch of loose parts. Mostly it's cardboard, wood, saws, hammers, nails, whatever I can get my hands on. And then there are different sections. So as I said, I share what we know about play, which is great. We've been looking at play for whatever 60, 70 years, which is amazing. And so there's a lot of information out there that we can share. I also have been doing some documentation of my sons growing up in a world filled with play. So as you mentioned in the intro, we live in Northern Ontario. We live near the forest. Well, actually, we live in the forest. And so my son has been playing with loose parts and nature all his life. And so when I bring those into a space and I share that information with adults and then I let them play, it's like the theory and the practice come together in their brains, and then it makes sense to them because they're feeling it themselves. They're feeling the joy of self-directed play. And so that's why they're able to accept the theory behind it. And so one of the things that I do with my training is I help teachers, educators incorporate that kind of approach, either in their daycare setting or in their classroom. And I do it at all levels. Mostly it's primary levels that bring me in, but I have done some work with some high schools because it's also very important then. I know the shift changes more towards academics, the more you go up in your grades, but there should also still be elements of self-directed exploration, especially in the sciences. That's my forte. My background is science. I'm a biochemist. So that's where I'm really pushing with the training, is try and get as many people aware of the importance of play.
Which is sometimes easier when you're actually doing it. You know, I was really thinking a lot about what you were saying while you were saying it and how that applies with my work as well. You know, all those before COVID, of course, I'm talking before COVID because I haven't really started schlepping all the hands-on stuff again right now. But before COVID, people are like, why are you traveling with all this stuff? You know, you don't need to have all this stuff. You put it on a slideshow. And I'm like, if you've never touched it, you're not going to be called to action to go back and do it if you haven't done it. So I'm loving that you're bringing them to it. And I really like how you phrase that the joy in the self-directed play, now the theory, like I'm more open now for that theory to be relevant to my work. And that was very nice.
Yeah. And I think that piece about loose parts, I think so many times people think they have to have all the plastic in a classroom and they don't have any money, so they might as well do large groups because they don't have any materials, right? So giving them a way to bring in inexpensive materials that children can then use as play, and showing them that, again, just as Lisa was talking about, giving them the experiences is so helpful. Because I don't know about you, Pierre, but in the current generation of high school and young college students, they don't know what play is.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here.
They didn't get it. They're mowing the golf course, so I have to keep myself muted right this second. But you can't give back what you didn't get.
I'm noticing that a lot. Like when I travel in different parts, doesn't matter where I am in Canada or in Europe, at the end of a presentation, especially with educators, is that one of their biggest challenges is to try and convince parents why their child is being picked up and their clothes is dirty, you know, from having played outside. And we're at a point in our history now where the parents of young children, they themselves, just as you said, have been hyper structured and hyper focused. Their time has been scheduled. And so they never really often got the chance to explore free play or to explore freely their environment. So it's not really their fault. They just don't know how to transmit that, right? Because they think that, okay, well, I've been hyper structured, hyper scheduled. That must be how the world works, and let's move on, right? There's been a focus. Why? you both know Peter Gray, and Peter Gray's work has shown that, this type of free play has been diminishing since the 50s, and also that psychological distress has been increasing in those times. We have similar reports here in Canada, where here in Ontario, there's a study that showed between grade 7 and 12, the students there in grade 7 and 12 were up to 39% that are displaying anxiety and depression, and 17% are experiencing severe depression. So we've, as a society, we've kind of lost focus of the well-being of our children, and we think that the best thing to do is to schedule and focus on outcomes and academic achievement or athletic achievement, and we don't give room for play. So that's the main impetus for providing these training opportunities, is to help those working with children to understand why we need to go that way, and helping them and give them tools to do it with, but then also to reach out to parents and other adults who might be a little bit more removed from play, let's say municipal workers, but they also have a role to play in promoting play. A lot of times they set up rules that are obstacles to providers of play. So I think that's why it's very important to provide play training for all adults, whether you have kids or not, just to make sure that you understand why we're making place in our society for children to play and explore.
And I'm wondering if, as advocates of play, which many of the people who listen to these Porch Play Chats are, and we certainly are, I'm wondering if there is, and I'm thinking that maybe we need to do a compilation of the research. And I'm thinking back to, it's either Peter Gray or Stuart Brown, I can't remember which one, because I've done a presentation that talks about risky play and the importance of risky play. And I used one of their quotes or one of their research studies that said parents who experienced playful, risky experiences where they climbed trees and they played in ponds and they did all of this stuff are much more open to giving their children those risky experiences and don't feel like they're bad parents, right?
Yeah.
But the people who were more sheltered, which is really even some of our soon-to-be adults who are more sheltered, are very, very reluctant to let their children climb that tree or to do anything that might be what we consider risky but not hazardous, right? In the difference.
Yeah.
And so, I'm almost wondering if we have to do an entire new generational education on why play is important and how we, as an international play association, can actually do that together with all of our countries and then be able to share that with the world, because I really feel like we've lost, I feel like the momentum for play with adults because of COVID in particular has become more accepted. We're so glad to be back in our social groups, but I'm not sure it's translated down to our youngest citizens with all these standard-based expectations that are so unrealistic and creating children who are so anxious and depressed because there's no fun. Right?
So I'm going to toss something out that might sound kind of morbid. But a lot of the people who have the memories of growing up like this, to where you say go play and they're like, well, yeah, duh, that's what you do. They're dying.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so when the new crop of people coming into our profession, unfortunately, didn't get that, that scares me. And I'm not quite sure, except now, Deb, you've kind of articulated a solution, or at least a suggestion. It's like play needs to be presented in a whole different kind of model. Like we can't rest on the laurels of the assumptions, right? Like we've got scads of research, years of research. We don't need to prove it. The proving has been done.
Yeah.
But we need to get better at translating it into practice, especially if you didn't get it when you were younger.
Yeah. Yeah. And that context, that life context is very important as well, as you point out. So a lot of those people, like I'm from that generation that grew up, like go out and play and come back. And so whenever I'm doing workshops, I share some stories from Europe. My partner is German, so we spent a lot of time in Europe, and a lot of people say, well, why does Europe seem to be more advanced? And again, it's your context, it's your perspective, right? So my partner's mother like grew up in Hamburg with bombs falling on her head, right? And so you know, you were careful, you made sure that if you heard a siren, you went underground, but then when you didn't, you came up and, okay, well, there's a bombed out building there, let's go explore that. And so they grew up exploring bombed out buildings, and they would tell stories, Susan's mom tells stories of finding plates in an old house and throwing them around like frisbees and things like that. So Europe kind of grew up in a space where there was risk all the time, and they weren't going to stop their children from playing. And so people who grew up during the war, well, after the war, they were not going to impede their children's play because they were just happy that no bombs were falling on their kids, right?
Yeah.
So they have that perspective. Us here in North America, we don't really have that, right? And so we tend to err on the side of caution. And again, those strong lobbies of educational or academic performance or health and safety, they have done a job at kind of pushing play to the side. And so, as you said, Lisa, we know through research and practice the importance of play, but we just have to get it out there. So to bring it all back, that's why I do that play advocacy, is through the Adventure PlayDays. And there the adults see what's going on, and they can palpate the joy that the children are feeling when they are playing. And then during the training, it's so important. So I've been doing training since about 2003. And the first ones, people didn't want me to mess up their spaces. So I presented information. But when I was able to finally bring some loose parts and paint and things like that, that's when I noticed that the people were getting it on a different level, because as we said earlier, they were able to feel that joy of self-directed exploration. And that really cemented the theory for them. So that's why I really try not to do training sessions without play opportunities. So during COVID, obviously it was a little difficult. My work pretty much stopped. But then when we started doing more things online, what I would do is I would send a package of tools to whatever group I'd be working with, and then we do it online. And then they would be in a similar space, or they were individually gathering some materials and doing some playing as well. So I still incorporated a self-directed play opportunity within virtual training, and the participants appreciated it. So granted, I would rather be in person, but there are ways of doing that hands-on, incorporating that hands-on into a virtual presentation as well.
So Pierre, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Walter Drew, who, famous Walter Drew, does the play experience, where it's 3 hours and you have all these wonderful loose parts at conferences. And then because of COVID, he and Carly Bedard went virtual. And so they do the play experience, but it's only like 20 minutes of play. And we've had them do it with our grad students at Champlain College in the leadership program, right, in the leadership course, where they gather their materials, and then one of the residencies, virtual residencies, is a play experience with Walter and Carly. And it is amazing. And they're all ages. So our grad students some of them are undergrads taking grad courses. Some of them have been in the field for 30 or 40 years getting a master's degree. And even hearing their responses about, oh my God, this just brought me back to, I didn't realize what I've been missing and what my children have been missing because this is what I did in my 20 minutes, and this is all the thoughts that went through my head. And it was, it's powerful when they have the opportunity, because I think we're so rushed and busy and we have so many things to do that we don't take that time, that downtime to relive it again or to experience it maybe for the first time. We had a couple of younger grad students who said, wow, I need to do this more often. I am amazed at how I was so stressed out when I got here, and I was worried about what this would be like, and I wasn't sure what I should bring. And it was, I feel so much better than I did 30 minutes ago when we started the residency. So it's powerful. And if we could just somehow or another capture that in some way, shape, or form and help people recognize that when you can manipulate objects, whatever they are in your household, and you have some space and time, what are you feeling, and how is that different than when you started, right?
And imagine, shut up, if it was more than just 20 minutes. What if we finally drunk the Kool-Aid of thinking that this is what it could look like the whole day? And not just as a special treat or a field trip.
Or or a reward for something.
Or you were good, so you can go play with the loose parts box.
Oh, goodness.
So my workshops take on different formats, and so I offer a full day workshop. So that was easy pre-COVID. But then last year, someone said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a virtual full day workshop?" And yes. And so we went. It's a 6-hour workshop with an hour break in between. And I was apprehensive. I was like, well, okay, I'm usually up for anything. We'll see how it goes. And so that's what I did. So it was last November. And they were on the East Coast of Canada. And so I was able to ship some tools to them, and then they distributed. A few people were able to get together at one site, and then a couple people were alone and stuff like that. And what I did is I sent them a list of materials that I wanted them to gather. And to my, not surprise, but to my relief, to my relief and surprise, it went amazingly well. Everyone was so receptive. Everyone was on board, and they really appreciated that mix again of the information, the anecdotes, and the ability to be able to play, because these were a group of early childhood educators, and often they're setting the stage for play for their kids. And so they really appreciated someone else setting a stage and giving them permission to play as we were sharing some information and stuff like that. So it was a really big hit, which was great.
Pierre, are you able to rattle off the top of your head? I'm putting you on the spot. What was on the list?
Oh my goodness. So I had a box of any size, normally a shoe box, elastics, pencils, paper clips, a hammer, nails, some wood, whatever they wanted. So I gave them a little bit of a list, tennis balls, things like that. And then pipe cleaners, whatever. Like I had a little standard list, and then I told them whatever else you can find. So most people got the list, and then some people embellished with other things that they had lying around the house, which was great. And then we did kind of like a play parade where everyone kind of presented what they had created and talked about it. And then what I get to do with them. So there's kind of like, I call that the free play session. But then in the afternoon part of the program, I send them back to their creations, and I tell them, okay, now I want you to make additions or modifications to target specific outcomes. And so they do that, and then they share that as well, like open-ended questions. What did you do this to maybe reach a literacy or a numeracy outcome? And then I ask them which activity they like the most. And they always say the open-ended morning, And so that's why I tell them it's important to give your children that open, free play opportunity, because just like you know, they feel that the constraints of looking for that outcome or getting to a goal, you know.
And I would probably say that and this is, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not. But I'm saying how powerful it might be for some people, not everybody, but for some people, to see that no modifications to the morning experience needed to happen in order for some kind of a standard or learning objective to be made, right? Implying that the free piece of it did all of that.
Yeah, and that's what we go on to talk about in like, as a professional in education, I don't walk in with specific outcomes. I prepare the environment. I give loose parts, I give them, and I give very, very little direction. And I just say to the kids, and as a professional in education, it's my job through my observation, my documentation, and my reflective practice to note, to make that learning visible, right? What I always tell teachers is that I can pull out almost any outcome from children playing, you know.
Yay! I knew I liked you the first time I met you, Pierre.
So
I think we actually mentioned that the last time you were here, is that when it's the free play, I'm meeting tons of objectives. But if I then try and plan play based on 3 objectives, how limiting is that? You tick more boxes, not that that's what we want to do, but you're going to tick more boxes by an open-ended experience than thinking you have to do it the opposite way.
Well, I think the other big piece to that is what, you know, we see so much in education is silos. We're going to do a math activity. We're going to do a science activity. We're going to do a literacy activity. And when they're free playing, they're doing all of those things and tons more, right?
Yeah.
And so
we have to burn down the silos. Let's write that paper.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, that paper. Burn down the silos.
Yeah.
It's time to get back to the way humans learn.
And those stray bales.
Yes,
Oh my God.
Fails. That's exactly what I tell the educators and teachers in my workshop, is that when children are playing, they touch upon all the developmental aspects, right? So like cognitive, social, spiritual, emotional, so they touch it all. And one of the little stories I tell them is that like when children want to go play, well, little Frankie doesn't go up to Joanne and say, you know what, Joanne, my cognitive skills are really poor. I'm going to go work on my cognitive. You know, and Joanne is like, you know what, Frankie, my social skills are crap. I'm going to find some friends and work on my social. You know, they don't do that. When they're playing, they're touching upon all of their development. So
I'm going to steal that, Pierre. I'll give you credit, but I'm stealing that. That's a good one.
Go ahead, do it. It's usually a big hit. Now, one thing that I do caution people, so as humans, we like to compartmentalize things because we think that it makes it easier to learn, but what in fact it does, it makes it easier to grade, right?
Yes.
It makes it easier to evaluate. And so one of the things that I'm cautioning people about is, over the past 10 years, in my workshops, I tell them, okay, this is how play works. But over the past 10 years, more and more people have been looking at play, and we started looking at individually risky play, outdoor play, active play, you know. And so what I do is I caution them to not focus on only specific aspects of play, because as soon as we compartmentalize play, we'll have destroyed play. Right?
Yeah.
Like it won't be play anymore. We'll be saying, okay, you need 20 minutes of risky play, you need 30 minutes of active play, you need 40 minutes of sedated play, whatever. You need 10 minutes of play wearing blue clothes. So we have to be careful of prescribing different aspects of play, and simply trust that when children are playing freely, they're touching all those aspects of their development. Amen. And as professionals, it's our job to pick that out.
Well, and I think that is a perfect way to close out, because I do think, because we're so worried that people are afraid of risky play, right? So I do sessions on risky play and why risky play is so important. And we talk about child initiated play, and we talk about playful learning, right? So, you know, in one of my courses, you know, we're really focused on curriculum and play, right? But it doesn't there are playful learning experiences like Reggio Emilia provocations you put out on the table and you let children explore, and there's no direction other than the question. I planned something for you today that's over here on the table, and it's make a pattern, any pattern you want, just make a pattern if you're interested, right? And then you have the child initiated play where they're just going around doing whatever they choose to do. And then you might have a teacher guided, because sometimes teachers say, well, I have to do this and this. Yeah. Well, what does that look like? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you do this much of each one of these, right? It means that these are choices that you have, and you need to balance. You need a balance of all of them together, not 20 minutes or 15 minutes and rotate, right? Yeah. So I do think that that is something that we need to caution people, because if they haven't had playful experiences at all, they may think that they need to compartmentalize.
Well, and then the other thing that happens with that is that then they get away with thinking that there's some kinds of play that are okay and acceptable and other kinds of play that are not. So I try and I'm like, get rid of all the modifiers that you're using before the play. Like, you know, I respect the body of work that acknowledges that there's different play types. I get that. Yeah. And play. We need to make room for play.
Yeah.
And not so worry about compartmentalizing it.
Don't worry about it, because then you start getting into that there's some kinds of play that are somehow more valuable than other kinds of play. And then it's just like, now we're fighting over something we thought we were believing in. And it's like,
Exactly.
Well, what's really interesting with students is that sometimes they'll say, well, you know, and this is what I get a lot, because that was their experience, right? So again, we do what we experience. They're like, large group, I'm going to do everything in large groups. And I'm like, let's talk about that. So, you know, so it because sometimes these concepts are brand new to them.
Yeah.
They need some boundaries and definitions, but then they need to understand. That's why I take them outside and they play. And then we come in and do exactly what you did. What did you do physically? Gross motor wise, fine motor wise, socially, emotionally, cognitively, language and literacy, you know, all those, we bring all that in and they're like, oh my God, we played for 45 minutes. Look at everything we did. I'm like, yes.
And none of it was on a lesson plan. Oh, shut up.
Yes, right. Yes. And there was free play involved. There was a large group activity with the parachute if they wanted to join, you know, but there was stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, can we do this again? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to.
And you know what else? Look at, we're going to go over time here. And you know what? You don't need me to facilitate that. Like, you're a big person. You can go out and do this your own self. This doesn't have to be an assignment.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the heart of child-centered pedagogy, right? Like when you put the child at the center of the pedagogy and you kind of you kind of support their natural interests, and you know, because you can have 20 kids, they're not all going to do the same thing with the material, but you can still pick out learning for each child, right? So
amen.
Easily. It's so much easier than trying to plan for something. If you just allow it to happen, it happens, because their body is telling them what they're ready to learn next. And you just have to be there to support it, right?
And maybe that's what we can talk about next with you, Pierre, is why do we think it has to be hard in order to be of value?
Yeah.
Ooh, you want to unpack that with us next time?
Oh, I like that. So I'm writing that down, Pierre. So July. Why does it need to be hard
to be valuable?
I love it.
Why don't we trust that visual that you just said, Pierre, of the child in the middle and us doing the dance around, right? That the facilitating of that, the observing of that. What does this child need from me? Which it might be different than the other 19. Like, why is that? When did it come to pass that wasn't enough?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly
I think it's just because it's difficult, right? Like we can unpack that some other time, but I think it's, you know, like everyone wants to be able to evaluate. Like there's so much pressure on educators and teachers to evaluate, and so they have to put everything in evaluatable boxes or spaces, you know, and so that's So that's why it's a little tricky. And unfortunately, that's probably why we're seeing those rises in anxiety and depression in a schooling system, because for far too many kids, school has become a place where they are told they don't measure up, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's, yeah, so there's that downfall to that system. Easy to evaluate, not always the best. Like a lot of kids, most of kids are fine with it, you know, they'll be able to cope with it, you know, they'll learn the system and play with it. But for so many students, you know, it just becomes
overwhelming and anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Pierre, of course, this has been amazing. So don't go anywhere while I close out. So to learn more about IPA-USA, please visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And until next time, keep on playing.